now. And I'll turn it over to Jake to talk about the farming and present our first item. Thanks, Jake.
Great. Well, thank you all again for having me here tonight. I wanted to make this, more of a conversation than a presentation, although I do have a couple slides. So I'll share my screen and go through a couple slides talking about what exactly fish farming is, the specific type that we're combating here in California, and then what we can do about it. And then I'm happy to open it up to any questions or, make it a conversation. So sharing my screen. Let me know if anyone can't see this. But so I'm the Southern California organizer with this national nonprofit, Don't Cage Our Oceans. So we are a 501c3 representing a coalition of different groups from all across the country, ranging from, environmental groups, environmental justice groups, progressive groups to fishermen and fishing restaurants and fish markets, and really anything in between. So anything that affects the ocean pollution, and fishing practices, we welcome to our coalition. So first talking a little bit about what this problem is. So industrial scale finfish farming or aquaculture is when they cram thousands of fish into these little pens out at sea. And so they're really densely packed, and sea lice can spread rapidly, which is really bad for the fish, makes them unmarketable. So to deal with that problem, these large corporations pump different kinds of antibiotics into the water to kill the sea lice. Now, those antibiotics obviously leave the pens, and they're very bad for the water, bad for the rest of the marine ecosystem. They can cause toxic algae blooms and make it really hard for other forms of wildlife in the marine ecosystem to live in those areas where these pens exist. And so that's one of the many reasons why they're bad for our ecosystem. Another reason is that there are fairly frequent escapes. There was a big escape up in Washington State just, I think, a year and a half ago that led to the practice getting banned in Washington. And so when the fish escape, the genetically inferior fish interbreed with the wild fish, and that can be devastating to fish stocks. Marine mammals can also get entangled in these pens. So migrating humpback whales, seals, other kinds of animals can get caught and die in these pens as well. And perhaps most importantly, it's really, really harmful for local working fishermen who their entire lives are making a living by fishing off these shores. And now not only the areas where they fish, these sites are going to be located, but also the pollution caused by these sites can kind of scare away fish, create dead zones in the water, make it harder to fish. And then even more so when they do fish and you do successfully fish, and you come back home, it's harder to sell that fish at a fair market price if you're being undercut by these massive corporations that are just factory farming their fish and can sell for a lower price. So we saw that in Alaska in really the 90s. There's this huge, huge salmon fishing industry. And as soon as farmed fish were kind of introduced into the salmon market, you see this entire fishing communities in Alaska just collapse, mass unemployment and, a lot of economic problems in those local fishing communities. So we want to make sure that does not happen here in Southern California. So some political context for this issue. So this is only, really allowed since May of 2020, when Trump signed Executive Order 13921, which allowed this practice in federal waters. So he wanted, for the economic benefits, he wanted it to be easier and cheaper to get seafood. So he signed that executive order, and it's a bit of a legal gray area, but since then, technically they'd be allowed in federal waters. And then another thing this executive order did is it had NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, find 18 of the best places in the country for these sites. And 10 out of those 18, according to NOAA, are here in Southern California. And as you can see on this map, 8 out of those 10 are right there in the Santa Barbara Channel. So right in our backyard would be where these sites are built if they are permitted. So in addition to the executive order, there's also legislation being debated that would either supersede or overrule the executive order. So there's one bill in particular called the Seafood Act that was introduced last Congress by Congressman Alan Lowenthal from Long Beach that would allow up to 4 of these fish farms in federal waters under the guise of studying them and studying them a year after, and then there'd be more developments from there. I mean, it's a bad bill for a whole lot of reasons, including the fact that they've already been studied. We already know the effects, on the marine mammals, on pollution, on the fishermen. We don't need more studies, and even just 4 sites is 4 too many. So we're standing against the Seafood Act. So Congressman Lowenthal is no longer in Congress. And so Congresswoman Brownlee, who represents most of Ventura County, is now stepping up and we think is going to reintroduce this bill in the coming weeks, or at least the coming months. And so we're really talking to a lot of groups all up and down the whole region in Ventura County specifically, urging them to sign on to this letter we're addressing to Congresswoman Brownlee, telling her to not reintroduce the Seafood Act, or if she is going to reintroduce it, change the language so it doesn't actually mandate these developments. There are ways you can study it. There are ways you can kind of, exert congressional control of the issue without mandating that some are built, which we find to be incredibly harmful for, again, our ecosystem and our fishermen. So these just are some of the things that we do as an organization. 3 main focuses. As I said, we're really focused in Ventura County, but also LA County and Santa Barbara, doing a lot of stuff like collecting petitions, driving in calls to members of Congress, media. So we had a op-ed out in the San Diego Union Tribune just last week. If you Google my name and the Union Tribune, it should come up first. And we're working on one to the Ventura Star this week with a local fisherman named Eric Hodge, who fishes out of Santa Barbara. He and I are working on one. We're going to try to get submitted this weekend to the Star. We're doing a lot of social media work, a lot of letters to the editor and stuff like that, just to raise awareness about this issue. And then the single biggest thing they're doing right now is building out our coalition. So as I mentioned, that includes different things, including a letter to Brownlee's office for groups in Ventura County. I know you guys are more Santa Barbara. And so the other thing we're doing is just building out our general coalition. So our current coalition, as I said, is environmental nonprofits, ocean nonprofits, social justice, environmental justice nonprofits, in addition to fishermen and fishing companies, seafood restaurants, stuff like that. So we are asking if SBCAN wants to sign on to our coalition. Really simple process. It takes like 5 minutes to fill out the form, and then your logo is on our site. And that's really all that entails. There's no, kind of obligation after that. If you want to sign on to additional letters, you're of course welcome to, but joining the coalition just strengthens our hand. When we go and meet with these leaders in DC, we can say, well, we have 30 groups ranging from SBCAN to this fish market, whatever it is. And this shows the breadth of our support here in Southern California. So at some point, you guys can discuss that and let me know if you have any interest in signing on to our coalition. Just in the last week, we had a couple new sign-ons. We had this fisherman in Santa Barbara, Eric Hodge. He signed on last week, in addition to LA Waterkeeper, and then a seafood restaurant as well. That's all in the last week or two. That just shows the type of groups that are signing on to the Don't Cage Our Oceans coalition. So that's all I had in terms of a presentation, but I'd be happy to kind of take this conversation wherever you guys want to go with it for the next 10 or so minutes. It's a very pressing issue for multiple reasons. So I can talk more about the science of it, more the social effect of it, or about the politics of it and the bills that we're fighting as well. So feel free to ask any questions or any comments or anything like that. Yes, Sandra?
I'm just curious, how deep do these pens go? How deep do they go?
45 feet, I believe, on average. And they're in federal water, so it starts 3 miles out. But of course, the companies want to be as close as possible so that the giant fishing barges, the feed barges, don't have to go as far. So they're usually parked right at the 3 mile mark, which is actually really close. That sounds really far if you're talking to the layman, but 3 miles is pretty darn close for our fishermen. And so they're normally roughly, I think, 30 feet or 45 feet in diameter and 40 feet deep, something like that is the average.
Any other questions? Yeah, Doug, go ahead.
Please, Doug.
So my name is Doug. I'm a commercial aquaculturist. I've devoted my entire career to trying to positively affect change in the food systems that are oriented around the marine environment. And I don't agree with a lot of what you've said, but I don't see that there's much point in trying to do a point-by-point item. But I would like to make a couple comments in particular.
Please.
The first is that referring to aquaculture in this way, in this sort of monolithic depiction, is about as useful as referring to industry, right? The aquaculture is far more diverse in practice and in implementation than you're giving it credit for. To use one of your examples, salmon fish, finfish aquaculture can exist in an extraordinarily environmentally irresponsible manner. It can also produce fish that are on par in quality and environmental sustainability with some of the best fish in the world. There is an enormous diversity in practice, and to lump them all under the same heading is somewhat disingenuous. But that's sort of just an aside. The more important thing that I'd like to sort of put on the table for your general consideration is that the aquaculture opportunity areas, first of all, do not circumnavigate permitting. Secondly, have been identified not for finfish aquaculture per se, but for all marine aquaculture, and specifically inclusive of shellfish and seaweed aquaculture. This is the area of my expertise. Shellfish and seaweed aquaculture has more potential to fix carbon and soak up dissolved inorganic nutrients from the nearshore marine environment than any other advancement in food systems that we are likely to see in our lifetimes. The AOAs and the Seafood Act and the Aqua Act are pieces of legislation that will standardize the permitting approach, not do an end around on the permitting approach, but standardize the permitting approach so that projects can be evaluated on their merit. There are 2 candidate projects that are proposing to be considered for the Santa Barbara Channel right now. One of them is a shellfish project using mussels, and the second is a large-scale seaweed project. There are no fish farms proposed for the Santa Barbara Channel. So what we would be doing by undermining the Seafood Act, the Aqua Act, and the AOAs would be short-circuiting the permitting process and the evaluation on merit of projects that can fundamentally fix enormous amounts of dissolved carbon, provide jobs, promote a blue economy, reinvigorate working waterfronts, and decouple ourselves from reliance on high carbon footprint imported seafoods. California for our own food impacts in our own backyards rather than outsourcing them to other countries. So that's my little spiel. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that, anyone.
Right. Thank you, Doug. That's genuinely informative. Just a couple quick things there. Right. I did not mean to use the word aquaculture in such a blanket way. When we say aquaculture, right, the purpose of Don't Cage Our Oceans is fighting specifically industrial scale finfish aquaculture. So what does that not include? It doesn't include any kind of kelp farming, shellfish farming. It doesn't include aquaponics, which is on land, and it doesn't include indigenous practices of doing it on really small scale. But it's the large scale commercial stuff that's really awful for the waters, the fish, the animals, and then potentially the fishermen as well that fish those same kinds of fish can be undercut in the market. That's specifically what we're combating. And so, you know, I'm not the guy in DC, I'm not actively talking about the legislation, but I believe our intent is not to fully derail the Seafood Act, because the Seafood Act kind of puts the cart back in the lane of Congress compared to the executive branch, which we think is where it belongs. But what we want to do is amend the Seafood Act before it's even introduced to make sure that it doesn't require these sites. So we understand it's just a way of simplifying the permitting, and that's okay, but it shouldn't mandate that certain number are permitted, especially when we're talking about this large scale stuff. We're very for mussel farms, very for kelp farms, like those candidate projects. It's just the large scale stuff we're really cautious of. And so we want to make sure there's not like a pre-written requirement for them before a bill is passed, before the permitting even begins. Right, so we're not opposed to AOAs on concept, we're opposed to AOAs that would then house these industrial scale finfish farms. So just a little more context. But I would love to talk.
It's worth pointing out that the AOAs didn't just occur in a vacuum. The AOAs were like subject to like a huge multi-layered siting process where they viewed existing data on commercial fishing, existing data on recreational fishing, transportation corridors, military layers, tourism, view sheds. known marine mammal migration routes, essential fish habitat, endangered species considerations. These AOAs have been identified as zones with high biodynamic productivity and minimal impacts. So they're cited specifically not because they are there to create impacts, but because they are there to minimize them. And the distance to port, i.e. this 3-mile notion, is directly if you're going to do a project at scale, and there's no such thing as small scale in aquaculture. You have to operate at scale to overcome the costs of doing business. If you want to move in this industry, it has to be at scale. That's the only way to provide jobs and provide a meaningful movement on carbon sequestration. But so obviously the carbon impact associated with taking work boats 20 miles as opposed to 3 miles, the 3-mile solution is more desirable. From a viewshed perspective, it's virtually invisible at 3 miles. You cannot see it.
Doug, if you put your email in the chat, I would love to find a time to talk as well. I would love to keep this dialogue going.
Happy.
Right, and just to reiterate one more time, we're not opposed to all forms of aquaculture, just these large-scale sites, whether they're 3 miles or 5 or 6, still has the same effect on the market for these local fishermen that are just trying to make a living and still have to compete against these giant corporations. Cliff, question or comment?
Yes, a lot of this is just going over my head. And what is an AOA?
Sorry, yeah, that was on the spread.
Yeah, I'm
slideshow.
sorry.
It's
yeah.
Aquaculture opportunity area. So there's 10
Okay.
dots that are on that map.
Oh,
the
okay.
Santa Barbara
Okay.
Channel. Those are the
Okay.
sites that NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, they identified as the quote unquote
Okay.
best sites, given all those traits of where these developments should be made. And so these 10
Okay.
sites with 10 like potential sites where they would be here in California. And 8
Okay,
out of those
thank
10 are
you.
right here in the channel.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I think for a lot of us, this is our first time hearing about this issue and these proposals. So yeah, just want to make sure that there's plenty of space for other people who have more questions about the project, or SBCAN, when we hear about things like this, we like to bring them to a roundtable and see what our members think, and then sometimes take it to the board and before we take a position. So that's
Right.
what we're doing here.
Any other kind of basic questions? Happy to go over some of the more technical stuff of like what it is or why they're harmful again. Let me know.
Jake, could you say again what the Seafood Act is?
Right. So the Seafood Act is a bill that we think Congresswoman Brownlee is going to introduce in the coming weeks that does a bunch of different things. So essentially it kind of reasserts congressional control over aquaculture permitting. So permitting of these fish farms in federal waters. But one of the things that it does is it mandates up to 4 of these sites to be built somewhere and then study them after the fact. But it's that clause of the bill that we're opposing, and that we are opposed to any of these new additional sites in federal waters. And so that specific part, we say 4 or more is 4 too many. We don't need more pollution, more disruption to our local fishermen and all that. Yeah, Ken?
Ken?
So a question for Doug, I guess. Are you opposed to, I mean, do you prefer that this bill pass and mandate these 4 sites?
The permitting of aquaculture sites in federal waters is a difficult and multi-layered objective, and there's not really been a clear lead regulatory agency for a long time. And what the result of that has been is that you have a great deal of sort of interjurisdictional, hesitation. Nobody's going to take the lead on something. So you have Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA and National Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries, all sort of occupying the same space. And it's very difficult to get clarity on where these projects actually go. And what you end up with is, unfortunately, a sort of a logjam in which these projects no longer end up being evaluated on merit. They end up sort of being smothered. And what it does is it drives investment and innovation away from California, which is where the seafood is being consumed. I am in favor of these bills because they're an important first step in evaluating a framework on how to do the permitting correctly. No one that I know in the aquaculture industry is advocating for reduced protections. What everybody is advocating for is for a clear framework so that projects can be evaluated on merit using actual data rather than a sort of lazy abuse of the sort of precautionary principle and a bunch of like what if type clauses. Aquaculture has changed a lot in the last 30 years. They're highly engineered. They pose minimal marine mammal entanglement risk. I mean, we have some rope here at our farm, which has a breaking strength of like 65 tons. It's like 2-inch Dyneema rope. So getting tangled in a rope like this is, like trying to get tangled in a steel cable on the Golden Gate Bridge. You can't get tangled in something as tense as that. That doesn't mean that these systems exist without impacts, but the Seafood Act and the Aqua Act are first steps on how to actually evaluate where we want to come down in the trade-off between impacts of a food production system and the benefits that are realized by displacing imports that also have impacts. I mean, the wild capture fisheries that Jake's talking about, those also have impacts. Legal capture fisheries in the Santa Barbara Channel include purse seiners, trawlers, and gill netters, all of which contain heavy bycatch impacts, which are invisible to most consumers. So it's not a like for like comparison to call out the impacts of one food production system and insulate it from the impacts of the alternatives. So yes, we are in favor of those pieces of legislation as common sense steps forward to evaluate these projects on merit.
Thank you.
Great. I think we should move on to our next topic, but Jake, I just wanted to give you a chance to say anything, any last
Yeah, no, thank you
response.
guys so much for having me here today, hearing me out. I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free to shoot me any kind of questions, or if you want to chat more, would love to engage. Can I keep this conversation going? So just let me know.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your time, and feel free to stay on for the next topics if you want. They're
Yeah,
not as
Thank you.
ocean related, but
It's very nice to meet you, Jake, and I look forward to continuing chatting with you.
Same.
yeah, and thanks, Doug, for your interest and your comments as well. And now our next topic is the Solomon Hills proposed housing development, and we've heard about this in this space at least once before. And we have Jackson Washburn and Valerie Cantella here to talk about the project. So I will turn it over to them.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Ken. Hi, Nadia. I was looking at my notes. It was actually a year ago exactly to the day that we were in this group talking about this.
Really?
Yeah. So we definitely appreciate the opportunity to come back around and give you an update and kind of tell you kind of where we are in the process. Valerie's on to help me with our presentation because she's better with IT than me. So as you all know, Solomon Hills project is, we're looking to create a sustainable and thriving community, for the future growth of the North County. Just to kind of remind everybody where we're located, the blue on this is Solomon Hills parcel. It is the eastern approximately 2,000 acres of the existing Orcutt oil field that's up there. If you kind of look at the North County constraints maps, you see it's hard, you can't go north, you come down into Santa Maria, you have east and west, you have ag and producing ag, you come down, you run into the constraints of the airport, and then you're down into the Orcut, which did a lot of work and put their Orcut community plan in place in like the early 2000s or late 90s, and did a great job. And as part of that, they identified what was key sites where future development, would happen to make sure that it kept the character of the area. So we are south of that. Orcut has been growing since they did that, and they're currently working through their key sites, and they've looking at areas as far as their next housing element. So all that's going on. We're south of that, and along the 101. So Valerie, if you want to move on to the next. So the oil field was discovered in 1901. Orcut was the actual geologist of Union Oil Company that discovered it. At its peak, when they had 2 oil towns up there, 2 company towns. They had people living up there. The father would take off with his pail and walk to the 20 wells, which were his to check, and they had schoolhouses, they had PO boxes. The upper right corner there, they actually had a swimming pool. That's a picture of the dedication of the swimming pool. Eventually, the field got so robust that they moved everybody down into what is now Old Town Orcut, and so it's been vibrant and in use since then. Currently, what's going on in Solomon Hills area is there's Mount Solomon, which has the communication, there's oil operations, as well as there's some cattle grazing. So on the property, there exists currently, there's roads that run across it. There's oil wells, there's third-party PG&E infrastructure that runs all the way across it from Graciosa Road, and then we drop down and have our own electrical infrastructure coming off of PG&E that goes throughout the facility, as well as there's a freshwater system for operations, as well as fire control. So while it's a pretty piece of land, it's been in constant use since the oil field has been developed. So this is where we're proposing inside of the blue. Primary access is anticipated to be along the 101. We also have the ability to get out to the 135. So that's be our secondary access, which puts us in proximity to Highway 1 that takes you up and around to Vandenberg. Another interesting thing. So go back, Valerie, please. So all of the wells inside of the blue area will be abandoned and completely the site remediated. We've done some environmental phase 2 and phase 1 and phase 2 investigative work on the environmental condition of the site. Pretty clean. There's some TPH areas that will need to be addressed, but most of the hits that need to be addressed are in conjunction with actual wells out there. So those be cleaned up as part of that. Also, we have the ability, because we own the land also all the way down to the Orcut trail system, to be able to connect the trail system and have the New Love picnic ground as part of this trail system, and come all the way down and connect to Los Flores to create a regional trail system. And once the oil and gas operations are gone, it allows us to open up this area, to that trail system as part of this development. So that's an exciting thing that we're looking at. Go on, Valerie. So kind of, if you think about that blue area that we're talking about, the approximately 2,000 acres, our footprint's only about 700 acres. So about 60% of this is going to continue to be open space and trails. We also going to be having essential infrastructure. We'll have the commercial to support this, but we also will have to build a school. We anticipate building a fire station and all the amenities and infrastructure and support that's needed in a community like this, as well as we envision having 40-acre business park. We envision high tech to support, the growth, and especially the things that are potentially going on in Vandenberg. So 60% of this will, it's a small footprint, and 60% of it will continue to be open space and trails. So this is what we're wanting to do, right? We want to create a sustainable and vibrant and diverse community for North County, right? The fact that it's of scale and we're starting from scratch allows us to really be innovative in resiliency initiatives and create a connected community, right? We really, and this comes from the top down from the owners, they really want to design a social, economic, and environmental, design that is sustainable on all fronts. So how do we get there, right? So our 4 fundamentals, we want to create that thriving and diverse neighborhoods. We want to apply environmentally sensitive water and energy practices. I mean, one of the things that we're doing is we anticipate building our own wastewater facility, which will allow us to have 100% of our irrigation and things being recycled water. Design diversity and equitable access. There's things that we think, especially since how long a timeline this is, in and amongst our development, it's already out there today, but we envision things like BEEP, which is a fully electric autonomous bus system that continually goes through the area so that everybody can jump on, get to the grocery store, get to urgent care, get to the flex space, get to the office space. So, because not everybody can afford or wants a golf cart or wants to jump in their car. Also, we plan on preserving the open space, as I said, and open all of that up for public recreation. So we have, we envision, and we've been talking to a lot of the employers in the area, Vandenberg included, and there is a very challenge in the north, especially for workforce housing. So this is kind of the bar graph of the 4,000 units kind of square footage. You can see over half of what we're contemplating is built under 2,000 square feet workforce housing. We actually, because we're starting from scratch, we have the ability to actually build the affordable housing units on site. We step up to multifamily, attached townhomes. Something that's really exciting that we like, and it's really kind of exploding all over the nation in the marketplace, are small homes for rent. So it allows people to actually have the home and the amenities of a house, but it functions like an apartment where you just pay your monthly rent. The management company takes care of everything else, and it takes away, and we all know in California it's a big hurdle. It takes away that hurdle of having to come up with the down payment, right? I mean, that seems to be a big hurdle for equity of access to people. So this is a great new product that is out there that really helps that. So that is what we envision. Some of our, because we're at scale, it really allows us, like I said, we plan on being 100% net zero carbon, no gas. We have the ability to put lots of solar in, obviously on all the homes that's required, but on bike paths, commercial centers, office space, we have the ability, as well in some of the areas that are too steep for homes, but good for solar, to be able to really generate a lot of electricity here. And this is such a long-term plan. Eventually batteries will catch up. So every house will be plumbed to be able to connect your electric cars in, and hopefully as batteries catch up, they'll be able to all have batteries to be able to store that. There's interesting uses of maybe geothermal to be able to use. If there's a common area with a pool, you can use that to heat the pool. All of these things are in use in different areas. It's just being able to bring them all to bear because we are starting from scratch. Obviously, wildfires and fires are a big concern here. We will have the ability through building materials, landscaping, HOA managed buffer zones, as well as a fire station, as well as all of the infrastructure internal to the development plumbed underground. So we have the ability to manage that and think through all of those issues to be able to address those. So part of this that I didn't mention earlier is we see a pretty good component, maybe 20% in our kind of research that, the active adult community that, won't be commuting places. We also see a campus for regional offices. We do see a demand for that. Fire station, also the wastewater treatment plant. So our goal is to generate jobs internal to the site so that we can be sustainable. Once again, the fire-wise, right? All the vegetation management, the landscaping we're putting in. It's just, we have the ability to start from scratch and really design it in conjunction with the fire departments. And obviously, and just as importantly, a socially connected community. I mean, we envision being able to build all those different product types in and amongst each other. So you have a community where, there's the retirees with down the street with the young family, with all of that it's hard now with just infill and bolt on to be able to get that. It's understandable. You move into a community, all of a sudden internal to that community, they want to build something completely different. You have those struggles. If we're designing it from scratch, we just build that into the concept, as well as all of these will be walking, all of these development areas will be connected with trails. We see electric bike stations, really have the ability, because we're starting from scratch, to really bake all this stuff into it. So kind of just to remind everybody where we are, this is kind of something that's unique to Santa Barbara County, and it doesn't really happen that much. But so we've spent a couple years kind of doing our viability, feasibility work to make sure that what we say actually we can do and it makes sense. We've been reaching out to stakeholders and communities. I mean, we talked to you guys a year ago. So we've been over the last year, talking to people. And not just that, but listening, kind of the grand listening tour. We submitted a pre-app, and that allowed the different departments to meet with us and then opine back to us kind of, the issues that they see or what they, what their thoughts were. And that was all baked into an application for general plan amendment initiation that we have submitted. And we are, at this point, on March 8th, we have our first public hearing in front of the Planning Commission. And what they are actually going to be hearing is whether or not they think this is something that's viable enough and of interest enough that will basically, if they say yes, initiate, it allows us at that point to go do all of our studies and do all of our applications and then come back probably in a year after all the work's done and put our applications in. And that allows staff to actually take our applications in and process it. Without this initiation piece, they can't. So that's where we are. We're asking the county that we think this is viable and it has enough merit to study. And then once all the applications in and they look at everything and deem it complete, then as you all know, there's the year-long EIR process where all of this needs to be vetted and proved up. And then at the end of all of that, there's the typical planning commission and supervisors hearings to talk about it with the community and then decide. And that's the vote that either actually approves the project or doesn't. So we're early on. I don't know if you can see it, but that bottom timeline goes all the way out to 2025. So it's many years of public interaction, public input, stakeholder meetings, and all of that. So where we are now is just, once again, just because it's an odd thing and you might hear different when you talk to people about this, we get no entitlements, we have no additional rights. Really all this does is allow staff to take our applications in and process it, which we, as part of that application, there's an agreement that we pay for their processing time. So we will even pay for their work. That's where we are. I just wanted to thank you again for letting us come in and keep you guys, you know, up to speed on this. And we definitely appreciate your time. You know, there's a lot on your plate, so we appreciate it. And definitely here, if you have any questions, comments, I mean, we'd love to hear from you.
Pam, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a good update. And I have a couple of questions. One is, did I hear you say that the Planning Commission has scheduled a study date?
Yes, so
And-
we have a hearing on the 8th, March 8th.
Okay,
And Valerie, what time is that? Do you know off the top of your?
Well, it starts at 9 a.m., but it depends on if there are other items on the agenda.
Yeah, we're not 100% sure about exactly the agenda, but
Right.
hearing starts at 9.
okay.
And it's
And
it's going to be in Santa Maria. It's in the north.
Okay. Would you define workforce for me? What are these
Yeah, good.
jobs? And it sounded like there would be internal and external people who worked within this project and without.
Right. So great question. So one of the people that we went and talked to is Marion Medical, right? And they have a problem. Like if you think of the bell curve of the people that work for them, they're kind of big part of the bell curve is between $80,000 and $120,000. You know, that is when you get to that point, there's that missing middle. There's no product type for them to buy or move into. And ironically, they're all moving to SLO and areas and commuting back in. So while we have affordable, which is kind of, you know, the arena and less, but also workforces, we have attached townhomes and things. So everything, if you think about that slide I had that had the different product types, over half of what we're doing is going to be less than 2,000 square feet. So just by the size, we're trying to build in and bake in that will be for workforce housing and not, you know, the typical person that wants to retire and move to the Central Coast. I hope that answers your question, Pam.
That helps. And you did talk about some transportation within that area. But it's still a distance away from everything. Then seems like a lot of cars are going to be needed. Santa Maria in the county does not have good transportation that's easily accessible and helps people get out of their cars.
Yeah, good question. Obviously, you know, we have not taken it to that level yet, but we envision us being, you know, a part of the Santa Maria transportation system as well, right? And you know, if Vandenberg grows like we feel there is, it'd be easy to, you know, get bus shuttles and things back and forth. You know, so while we haven't been able to unpack that yet, and because we are not initiated yet, we can't do all of those studies. We understand that is a concern. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to make sure that we bake into this so that everybody can get comfortable that it's not just everybody jumping in their cars.
Well,
Okay.
Jackson, if I may, too, the Chambers of Commerce are very excited about this, just to be able to provide some more housing stock to the region. So they're talking about spearheading some workforce housing project there, but also some electric shuttles going in and out of there from various employment centers. So like Jackson said, that's not fully baked, but it's something that we've been in discussion with them about already.
I have other questions, but I'll let others ask. Thank you.
I have a question. You talked about the like home hardening or the fire technology built into the home. So is this in like the high fire zone, or yeah, how is this area designated in terms of fire risk?
I don't think it's in any high fire zone. It's just we know that it's front of mind. And
Sure.
and that the fire department is very sensitive to it, right? I mean, so in some of our discussions with them, so I don't have the map in front of me, but this is kind of different small little villages, right? And so they want to make sure that you have two forms of access in and out, right? We've talked about, hey, you know, we want to make sure that there's some sort of fire break areas around that the homeowner associations will maintain, right? So that we don't have to deal with 200 different landowners. We can go right to the home, to the HOA, those sorts of things, as well as the landscaping, right? We'll make sure that when we go in, it's indigenous, you know, it's not going to need a lot of water, as well as, you know, a lot of the issues is power lines coming down and things. So we have the ability as we're building this to underground everything, as well as we will have, you know, a fire station on site. So, you know, it's just, I don't think this has any specific area that's of that concern. It's just, we all know that in this part of the world, it's everybody is concerned with it.
Great, thanks. And Cliff, go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing with the oil wells in that area?
Yeah, so all the wells will be abandoned, right? So CalGEM is the lead agency there. And so as part of, you know, you will abandon them as per an agreed upon abandonment plan. They oversee it every step of the way. I mean, every plug you do, you know, all the way to the end where you end up cutting it off 10 feet below finished grade. And so you can imagine a 2-to-1 layback to be able to go down in there. And then the last thing they do is they put a sniff inspector on it, make sure it's not leaking. They'll weld a cap on top of it. You'll survey it in so you know exactly where it is. And then as well as they put a vent cone over the top of it, and they run it to a place where they can sniff it again in the future to make sure that it's not leaking. So that's kind of the standard operating procedure that CalGEM runs. And then if you look separately, there's the soil remediation. Like I said, we've done phase 1 and phase 2 invasive testing to make sure that it's just TPH, and it is. So typically in that scenario, it's the Santa Barbara County Fire Department that will be lead agency. And you'll go in and show your sampling. They'll probably make us do a lot more sampling just to confirm where everything is. There'll be an agreed upon remedial action plan. They'll oversee that work. And then when that's all done, they'll what's called a no further action letter. But also there is attached to that no further action letter and that remedial action plan something that's called a soils management plan. So if you're out there grading or moving some dirt and you stumble across something that wasn't previously investigated, there's an agreed upon a procedure of what you do, you know, how clean you need to get it as far as parts per million. So it just so that everybody is aware what needs to happen. You know, they've created a belts and suspenders type procedure so that we don't run into the same things that happened in Santa Maria in the past, where they just build over things and then later realize there's a problem and have to kick people out of their house and address that. So they're very sensitive to that. So you definitely have two separate agency oversight watching you and confirming that that's what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, some may know what TPH stands for. But...
Oh, that's total petroleum hydrocarbons. So it's basically it's not. So there's no processing going up on the hill, and there never has been. So it's really just oil that's produced out of the ground. And it's not considered a hazardous material as per California EPA. When you really start having problems is if you have like you start processing gas and you start knocking out kind of the gasoline light ends. Those can tend to migrate via the soil, or you know, when you finally have processed things post refinery, you know, those are the things that are considered way more hazardous. So this is just anything that'll be in the soil will be from whatever happened years ago before there was any sort of you know, there was a spill. So it's just old hydrocarbons in the ground that you'll end up finding, and you know, there's no groundwater in the area where this is. We're kind of up in an upshot, so shouldn't be any groundwater contamination or anything. So it's just soils remediation, soils only. Okay, that was a great question.
Yes, Andy, go ahead.
Okay, if there were to be torrential hill, how close is this project to that? Would it affect
So
it?
So that's a great question. So there's there's some steep topography over there, but we're not in that area. But also part of our grading plans and part of the things that we're going to have to get approved and oversight is we have to build in areas where the catch basins where the water will be catched and diverted away from the houses, right? So unlike we wouldn't find any position where we'd have like, gullies or things going down, like kind of happened in Montecito and things where, worry about that maintenance. It's more kind of surface runoff to catch basins and then, slowly either collect it via, into your sewer system. And then we would clean that up, right? And then that all becomes part of the recycled water that gets pushed back out for landscaping and whatnot. But that all has to be engineered. So we have, specialty engineers that do that type grading plans and working with, with staff, as well as all of that. Remember, all of that will be reviewed under the environmental impact report.
Okay.
Great question.
Any last questions? Yeah, Pam, go ahead.
Thanks. You talked about the general plan amendment. Could you talk more about what that looks like, what that consists of?
So it's my understanding that with this process, where we are right now in the process, all we're doing is asking the county, the planning department, the planning commission first, and then ultimately supervisors, I assume, is this something that is viable enough that we want you guys to go study it? And it really just allows staff to be able to accept those applications and kind of look at it. It doesn't give any different, it doesn't change the zoning at that time. It doesn't give any additional entitlements. It just really sort of a ministerial thing to allow staff to upload all of the studies to be able to then start the process of unpacking it and looking at it and studying it.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Valerie and Jackson. We will.
I can't believe it's been a year.
I know,
Where
that's crazy.
Where did it go?
Yeah, but
Well,
we have your
once again,
contact. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
thank you very much. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me, as well as we have our website that has information, as well as there's an area in the website that you can ask questions or request information. So that's easy as well. But either one, I'm always available.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, take care.
And we have a packed agenda today. So we have one last item with Matt Riley here from Dignity Moves to talk about the Hope Village project in North County to house homelessness.
Right, Sarah. I love it.
Sarah has her paper there. And yeah, Matt, I have that video you sent me. I don't know if you want to start with that or.
I'm gonna let's end with that. So
Okay,
if we run out
great.
of time, we can just put it in the chat. People can watch it. Sarah's probably seen it already, I'm guessing. Hi. So hello, fellow concerned and involved Santa Barbara County residents and community members. I think this group is awesome. I'm learning a lot about these different groups in Santa Barbara County as my involvement with Dignity Moves ramps up. So I will probably be, if you'll allow me, I'll probably be a member probably 10 minutes after this call. I think what you guys are doing is really cool. I learned about aquaculture in a way I had no idea. So, and I frankly, although I don't want it on this part of the call, I like it when people do challenge speakers sometimes. So you don't have to do it with me, but I like it when people actually do speak up a little bit. Let me share my screen a little here. I'm going to try to go to my presentation. I don't know if I can do that, because otherwise you guys will all be staring at yourselves, which is kind of freaky. Can't do that. Here we go. Let me know, Nadia, if that worked.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Go to view, full screen mode. I think that worked. All right. So Dignity Moves. I'm going to go through about 10 minutes, and then we'll do the Q&A after. So what are we? We are, we say we're an accelerator, we say we're a facilitator of homeless housing, but at the end of the day, we're just a developer, kind of similar to who you just heard on the Solomon Hills. You know, we go through all the entitlements and the design and the construction of a project. And in our case, we only do interim supportive housing. What that means is it's not a nightly shelter, but it's also not permanent supportive housing. So this is where folks would go to get out of an encampment or off the street and to stabilize and get well enough to, and potentially just document ready or whatever they need to transition to a more stable housing situation. The need. So this is from the county's community action plan, and just an interim housing alone. Now they look at all different types of housing, but just interim housing alone, the need was calculated to be 563 beds, which kind of aligns with when they do like point in time count, which we just did last week or a couple weeks ago. And also just looking at how many folks go through the services that are offered for unhoused community members. And so the need is 563. Now we currently have 140, and there's another kind of 123 just out there being talked about on a couple of projects, and that leaves a shortfall of 300. And of the current 140 beds is our first project, which I'll get to. And so we built our first project. It's going extraordinarily well. And now we were at a moment where the county has said, hey, we need these 300 bed, we have to solve this 300 bed shortfall. What can we do? And the Dignity Move solution is really the least cost, but high value and option that we have. And I'll get to that in a second. So that's our goal. We're focused on this 300 number. What do we build? We build rooms that have a door and have a lock, which is the most important thing to attracting folks to get off the street and go into some place where they can stabilize and recover. Pets are welcome, partners are welcome, possessions are safe and secure, which is often not the case. If folks go into nightly shelters, sometimes they can't bring their pets or all of their possessions. But they have to agree to guidelines. They have to agree to create an exit plan with a case manager. And I was just at the site yesterday talking with the case managers and about how that's going, and it's going extraordinarily well. They have to agree to abide by certain rules like curfews and no drug or alcohol use on site. Doesn't have to necessarily be that they're sober, but no use on site. And actually what's happened in these communities is that there's a lot of trust between the case managers and the individuals. So there's a lot of conversations around that, and which allow for hopefully going into some recovery strategies. So we built the first project that went live kind of around August of last year. We built it in only 9 months. That's with COVID, supply chains, labor shortages. I can tell you it was a bit of a, you know, you have to navigate through all of that stuff like everybody has had to. I had to go out there a few times myself and put together some units. My daughter got all the bedding and everything for one of the units. So, you know, it's kind of a all hands on deck situation. And but we're really proud of it. It's 34 units, has dining room, laundry, showers, and actually 4 offices, one of which is used pretty much exclusively as a clinic for Doctors Without Walls, goes in there and does health services quite often. So the whole cost of it was $1.7 million, which is about $50,000 per door, which is dramatically lower than what we typically see on some of these types of projects, which are usually converted hotels at around 700,000+ or whatever. You know, in our area, housing is just so expensive. It's usually really expensive, but we're doing this new construction. It also is temporary in nature, and I can address that as we go along or in Q&A. But in the downtown project, we're looking at this as a 3-year term, and then we're going to take these, pick them up with a forklift, and we're going to move them, put them on a flatbed and move them to another site. And that's quite easy to do. So here's some more information about that. That's the picture of the front of it. It's actually quite beautiful, in my opinion. There's 34 units. Already 11 people have gotten jobs. Some people came in with jobs. This is 11 new jobs. We have 6 people who have gone to stable housing, and then another 2 have actually gone to more intense psychiatric psychiatric treatment facilities, which there are very few of those around. But that's a great, for those folks that need to go into that type of a situation. And we've had a couple of folks transition there. So already just in a few months, we've already had a lot of successes. So we're just delighted by how this is going. Moving forward, we have what I think a lot of you guys want to talk about, which Sarah put up there, which is a project called Hope Village, which is a 94-unit project. But there's some really unique and very cool things, in my opinion, about this. First of all, we've got 10 of these dedicated specifically to transition-aged youth, which is a fancy term for young adults, 18 to 24. You have an amazing, for those of you that live in Santa Maria, an amazing nonprofit called Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley. If you have not ever met Edwin Weaver, you need to meet Edwin Weaver, and you need to shake his hand and give him a big hug and say thank you. Dedicating his life to helping these young adults, and he has a 4-room home that he works out of. It's just not nearly enough, so he is very excited to have 10 units off, kind of on the side of the design for them. 30 units for recuperative care for homeless that are being discharged from the hospital. A very unique part of this, which is in partnership with Dignity Health Marion Hospital, which if somebody doesn't have an address to go to, it's very challenging for the hospital to discharge folks. So now they have not just a place to go to, but in 10 of the rooms actually have their own ensuite bathroom, which is unique. So folks that really have more intensive care, they can go there, rest, heal, maybe transition to one of the other rooms that doesn't have a bathroom so that somebody else, you can see how we can manage the site. So the balance of the 64 units or the 94 units are for just, sort of regular individuals or partners. So we are also working on a couple of other sites, mostly in the South County, because 94, it doesn't get us all the way there to where we need in North County. We are evaluating a couple of sites in North County. But the next sites after this will probably be in South County to kind of, that's where the majority of our homeless folks live. And so we're really excited about that. One project is kind of equal in size to Hope Village, and there's a couple of others that are smaller. Maybe one of them, we're really working hard to have one of them focused only exclusively on families where you have your own bathroom. Most of our projects have congregate showers and bathrooms, and that's not appropriate for kids to be sharing with other adults. This is a picture of Hope Village. This is what Sarah just put up. I'm very proud of this. I didn't want to have the public meeting without having this image, so I was really cracking the whip on the architect to get this over to us. I think this is a very powerful image. I think what strikes me on this is that it's actually quite a beautiful place. There's a lot of thought that goes into this. We have Gensler, which is our architect, who's a nationally renowned architect that basically does this. I don't want to say no bono, but they do it low bono for us because they really care about what we're doing. There's open space, there's community space, there's a dog run. There's, heating, cooling, air conditioner heating in these. There's restroom facilities, like I said, there's clinic, there's dining. So we're just really excited. On the left-hand side, you see the parking lot. The whole site is perimeter fence, security. There's one way in and out for security reasons, 24-hour security on the site. And so just very, very proud of the design and how this has come together. The location of which I haven't mentioned, is right across the street from the county offices. I should probably find a link to on the map. But if you know where the main county offices are off of Betaravia, it's just off of there on a vacant lot owned by the county, which someday they have plans to do something, but there's no imminent plan. And that's why it's perfect for us when we look at this and say, well, for 5 years, we could run this, and then we can move these over to another location, which, by the way, the amazing community of Santa Maria, one of the local churches already said, hey, here's a big piece of land that we have next to our church. We're not doing anything with it. How about you put them here? Maybe put other ones here, or maybe this is where some of these go, if not all of them. So it's just a really great to see the folks really embracing this idea. I cannot go through any presentation without mentioning an organization called Good Samaritan Shelter, because frankly, what I do, I tell them all the time. In fact, I saw Hector, their CFO, today down in Santa Barbara. He was taking a tour with some of his employees, Good Samaritan. And I said, hey, it may seem to you like this is hard, what I do, building and designing these things and getting them going. But frankly, the really hard work comes the day that this thing is ready to go. And the Good Samaritan team comes in and manages these. So Dignity Move's job is just to get it built and build these rooms so that organizations like Good Samaritan and Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley can get in there, Doctors Without Walls and others, get in there and do the hard, very important, tireless work to help these folks out. So that's where the roles are. Good Samaritan is going to be managing the whole Hope Village project. Like I mentioned, Finding Back Santa Maria Valley will be in there as well. And they're just amazing. So they run lots of different shelters throughout the county. They run sobering centers. Without them, I don't even know what our community would look like. They are amazing. And Sylvia Barnard, if you don't know Sylvia Barnard, you got to go give her a big hug or handshake. I would give her a big hug for you. She is tirelessly working, probably right now getting text messages from clients asking her questions, and she's helping them out. She's the executive director of Good Samaritan. Other partners is the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, provides all the food for our downtown project. I mentioned Doctors Without Walls. Frankly, whether you like government or not, I'm just going to tell you the county of Santa Barbara has been an amazing partner. So in this case, I think if you support projects like this, you really should, give them a thumbs up. This is an opportunity to do that. They've been really a champion trying to get these projects to move forward. Dignity Health, I mentioned, and SBCAN, which is an organization that goes out and does the advocacy out, a lot of the advocacy out in the encampments and in talking to folks and building trust. This is my advisory board. This is all Santa Barbara County locals, myself there, Jack Lorenz, who was my alternative person to do this presentation if I couldn't make it. But you'll start to see, if you get involved in this, you'll start to see Jack and I all over the place. And maybe some of you recognize some of the names above that are just kind of, I would call them champions of what we're doing on our advisory board. And frankly, one of the main things that this group does is that we have to raise a lot of money to build these. Majority of the money to build them, we raise philanthropically. Some of it comes from county funding, which is really flowing through from the state. And that's for the construction of them. And then the services side, basically what's paying the ongoing, that's being done all by the county. So, but that means we have a pretty heavy lift for the construction of them. And we're talking, most of the larger foundations have been very supportive. Lots of high net worth individuals have been very supportive. And really lots of folks have been giving, and it's really fantastic. So with that, I'm going to stop. It was a bit fast, Nadia. I just wanted to make sure there was time for Q&A. And then we can maybe show this. I think what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put this link in the chat, and then if we have time,
yeah, I recommend watching the video Matt's going to put in the chat. I watched it earlier today, and it's really, really great. It gives another level of information about the project and sort of a feel for it. But
So I'd like,
Jeannie, go ahead.
I'd like to share my screen. I pulled up the site on Google Maps, so we could all look at this. And I'm thinking you're talking about this site at the corner of Lakeside Parkway and Centerpoint Parkway.
Yeah, it's actually the southern half of that. So right below that.
Oh, so it's down here.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to show people, everybody's familiar with the county buildings. Here's the building where you go to testify, or if you need the county clinic or probation, social services. Here's Beta Moravia Road, Miller Street. So it's that parcel. So you answered a question I had, is why make it so that you can move it? And understandably, you'll need to move it when the county decides they want to do something with the lot. So thank you for answering that.
And I think also one of the things that supervisors Nelson and Lavanino mentioned at the public meeting we had a couple of weeks ago was, not one neighborhood should really have this forever. And I think that what we're going to show here, they wanted it to be right outside their window. They wanted to show that, hey, look, it's going to be right there. I'm going to watch it and see how it goes. I know from the Santa Barbara downtown site, which if you guys go by there at 1016 Santa Barbara Street, you might drive by it and not even know that you drove by it. So that's not going to be quite as like in, you know, more or less invisible here because it's a bit of a bigger area. But I think what's going to show the same thing, which you walk in there and it's calm, it's peaceful. People are resting, they're sleeping. Maybe they're sleeping for the first time in years. We've had people tell us it's the first time in decades. And so what we'll show here is that this is actually a really positive thing to have in the area. And so wherever we go next, hopefully we'll sort of know that and be able to have seen it in work for the 5 years that this project is here.
And I'm sorry, did you say when you think you'll be able to start this?
Well, I really hope to be putting shovels in the ground as early as next month, believe it or not. We're kind of on track to maybe be able to do that. There's some approvals that are going to happen with the county here at the end of February, fingers crossed. That's when it goes on the Board of Supervisors agenda. And with that, we can break ground. And then once we break ground, this particular site is not paved. So we do have to do some of that site work, which is different. You know, the downtown site was a parking lot. And I think the next South County site is also going to already have pavement. So we have a little bit more site work that we're going to have to do. But I think we could be operational. I'm hopeful we can be operational late summer, kind of August, September. So this year we can start housing people.
Wow.
That's our goal.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, Laura, and then Ken.
Okay, so thank you for that presentation. At the last Planning Commission hearing, Commissioner Park said, hey, you know, Director Plowman, we heard about this dignity move thing coming where, and it's right near us at the hearing room where we were in Santa Maria. And she said, yeah, it's somewhere over there. But the reason I'm asking the question is, so what kind, this has to be getting approved through like state housing legislation that specializes in this fast track stuff. So your entitlement process is really what, just working out a lease arrangement with the landowner? I mean, it doesn't have to be on public land. It could be on private land too. And then what is your entitlement process? Because I know the Planning Commission never saw it. I doubt if it went to design review, right?
Yeah, so it's state emergency housing ordinance appendix P, and it is exactly that, Laura. So it really doesn't involve the local jurisdiction to the extent that you would see it in a lot of other places. Now we did run this, of course, by county fire and city of Santa Maria fire, just to make sure we had like proper fire lanes and access, things like that. But a lot of the construction is done under that emergency ordinance. Now we tend to take it a little bit further, like there's a ratio of units to restrooms, and we kind of usually go a little bit more just from, we've learned from operations, like how should you really do this? But in terms of, you know, number of parking spaces, all the other stuff, there's some guidelines there. When it's on county land and county is doing that plan check review, it's quite easy. I would be honest with you. If, you know, I think that's the reason why these projects can move forward. It can absolutely be on, absolutely can be on private property. And I think we probably have the same plan check. What we've been doing, Laura, which kind of really smooths the process, is that we've been engaging the county all along in the design and just making sure that we're checking all the boxes. Plus, we're doing this throughout the state also. So we learned a lot about the ordinance and just making sure that everything's pretty tight. So that when questions come up, which inevitably in every jurisdiction, even in Santa Barbara, the county architect that was there for the first one is now retired. So we're kind of having.
Oh, Robert Ulley, yeah.
Yeah, he was amazing.
The one in Santa Barbara, Matt, did that just went through county plan check? It was county land, so you didn't get stuck in the city process, even though it's in the city's jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to use words like stuck.
Well, sorry.
But we did not.
I'm on the planning commission and I use the word stuck, so don't feel bad.
But we did not have, we did not have city plan check on that, but I can tell you that we had a lot of city support. I think that's,
Sure.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, just to be able to do a project like this in the middle of downtown and show that it's doing what we said it was going to do, for us, it's a really huge it was a really important proof of concept, frankly. I mean, we knew this was how it worked out, but a lot of people have never seen one of these in operations. And I think now that they have, it's really, it's actually facilitated why we can really do this in Santa Maria, is that, you know, Supervisors Nelson and Lavanino went down and they've seen the one in down, you know, they've seen it in action. But at the groundbreaking and all of the other ceremonies we had in the downtown, we had many city representatives there, council members, the mayor doing speeches, and we want that. Even though there was not a lot of involvement or funding on that particular project, we want folks to love these and really embrace them. And that's what we've gotten on the downtown site.
Well, nice job. It looks good. I can't wait to go visit the one downtown and look for it popping up in the next time I'm at the Santa Maria Hearing Room.
So that's it. By the way, that's a great. So we do tours all the time. I did one today. Usually do a couple a week. Jack does, like, when he comes, he lives in down south and he comes up, he does one every day. So if anybody wants to do them, we can just tell you when the next ones are, and you can just come along with a couple other people and walk in there. Oftentimes the residents are really proud to talk about what's going on or to show you their room. That's what happened today. So
Cool.
we'd be very respectful of the folks there. It is their home, but at the same time, we want to show people what's going on.
Nice. Thank you.
Oh, Pam, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I forgot I was
just
driving the
wanna-
bus.
I just want to say thank you for this. I've worked with the homeless a lot of all ages in Seattle. This looks like a very good project that's aptly named Dignity, which is something that's missing often. I know that because of the article in the Sun and the Times, you know, obviously there are community members who had a lot of questions and pushed back. How can community members like myself help support this project?
I love that question, Pam. Thank you for the softball question. That's really good of you to do that. This was not nearly like the first speaker that
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, oh.
Although you guys are pretty gentle on the developer, the second speaker, as a former developer, you know, it's, but I think that the main concern is by the very local community, right? The folks this is in their neighborhood. And I think what we want to do is talk about the fact that there are folks there now and in their neighborhood now. And what we will see is that many, if not all of those folks, will now be transitioning into Hope Village and hopefully going to a permanent, more stable housing situation. And this is not a day center. This is not a walk-in. That's just not how these work. There's 24-hour security. It doesn't mean that folks can't leave and walk around and go to the local businesses, that sort of thing. But I think what happens is, and what we've learned is that the folks that are in the Hope Village or what we learned in the downtown site is that the folks that have a room value that room so much that their behavior, frankly, when they leave, has changed dramatically. And it could be because of that. It also could be because they're getting the rest and the recuperation and the services and potentially medication and all these other things that they might need. So we think it's going to be a net benefit. So Pam, I think just telling that story that the issue is out there, it's significant. We have to do this, and we've looked at a lot of different places. This is the best place to do it in the North County, in the Santa Maria area. And I think just kind of highlighting that, you know, nobody necessarily wants these in their backyard. These types of communities, really, frankly, most development people don't want in their backyard, but especially something like this. I think in the case of the downtown Santa Barbara site, you know, one of my friends has one of the commercial buildings right adjacent to it, and I've been talking with them over time, and he just out of the blue texted me and said he drives by every single day. There's not one person out front, and frankly, there's no one within blocks of this site anymore. And it's a real change, positive change for that neighborhood. And I think just telling that story, and it's hard for neighbors, we're saying, trust us, you know, this is going to be better. It's really hard. So I think just having that conversation and talking through it, and frankly, Pam, I'm an advocate of, we also just really want people to be able to speak their mind and their concerns, because we want them to know that those concerns are heard and they're addressed to the extent we can address them. And I think that's also part of it. We don't want to just, hey, we're shutting it down and we're not listening. We really want to listen and hear the concerns, and just make sure if there's anything we can do to improve the project, we want to do it.
Well, you certainly have a terrific team with lots of experience and success, you know, Marion and Good Sam and Fighting Back, and yeah, on and on. So that says a lot to me right there.
We're so lucky to have, you know, particularly Good Sam and Fighting Back in just that local area. I mean, there are a lot of great services organizations throughout the state. I think we have the best, frankly. But I mean, I'm super biased because I was born in Santa Barbara County, but I have seen a lot of other projects that we've done, and who runs it is more important than who builds it.
Thank you.
Now, Sarah, you got your hand up, I think. Oh, I'm sorry,
So
Jamie.
I think Jaime's first, and I just want to note it is
Jaime.
6:30 if anyone needs to go, but we'll stay on a couple minutes, Matt, if you have a little bit more time just to get through folks' questions. Okay, great, thank you.
So,
So
Jaime first.
Yeah, so my only question is, are you planning to expand to Lompoc? Because here, I live in Lompoc and we have a big population of homeless people, young people. And I was just wondering if that will be some of your plans in the future.
There is a site called Bridge House, which is just right outside on the other side of the river. And there's been, Good Samaritan actually runs that one. And there's been some conversations around, you know, there's a lot more land there, and, you know, what more is appropriate there. So that's really one of the only ones I've heard that has really gotten traction. Although I am starting to hear now that Hope Village is moving forward, I'm starting to hear people say, well, what about this parking lot in Lompoc, or what about this over here? So we'll start to see those, Jaime, and we'll evaluate them to see like what makes sense. I do think to get to the full need in North County, I do think that you know, we're going to need a not a project as big as Hope Village probably, but another project somewhere in the Lompoc Santa Maria area, and there's certainly a lot of folks living in the riverbed down there, so it's a really big concern.
Thank you.
Sarah?
And this, I'm even more excited tonight than I was a few weeks ago. I mean, it was, you know, this is I know, because, you know, full disclosure, I'm on the board of SBCAN Health, and one thing people don't realize is Good Samaritan Shelter is a SBCAN Health provider.
That's right. The only one.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a neat thing, and we're getting ready for CalAIM, and you know, I have to be fully disclosure because of Brown Act, and it's like, you know, I'm excited, and I you know, I wasn't even afraid of those NIMBYs, because we had to let them speak their mind. But, you know, they kind of calmed down when they started hearing the plans, and that was so exciting. And, you know, it's just, you know, we all kind of coalesced together, and it was a moment that I think has to be in the history books.
We talk about it all the time, that advisory group that I told you about, that let's not take this for granted. Santa Barbara County taking the position that they want to build all of the beds necessary so that anyone on the street has a available bed. That's the calculation, essentially, that 300, 523 down 300. That is very unique. I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction or county size taking that position and saying, we've calculated the need and we're doing it. So we should be really proud of that. And I think the other side of that, Sarah, is that the uniqueness of putting these respite beds in these projects. And, you know, I'm just now starting the conversation with Cottage Hospital in South County about what is going on in North County leading the way on this, frankly.
Right.
And I want it to be an example. So everything that we're doing in Santa Barbara County right now is really an example for every other jurisdiction in California. So I'm here to try to make sure that we do it right and it's a success. And then, you know, hopefully folks on this call are champions and can kind of, you know, help us along the way.
And we got to be building blocks because, you know, Cottage has had its name out there for a long time, and it's time that they start pulling their weight. I mean, it's that simple.
So Jean, do you have, or Jeannie, is it Jeannie or Jean?
I go by Jeannie, but Nadia had her hand up first.
Okay, Nadia, sorry.
Yeah, just really quickly, when do you have a date for the Board of Supervisors hearing yet? You said February.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I think it's the 28th. So, but I'm not, you know, I haven't seen the agenda yet. And this is really to approve documents that we have to get in the final form in time for all that to happen.
Okay,
so
right.
all of that happens, but I think it's 28th. I can follow up with you when I find out.
Yeah, please do. And I guess, I just also wanted to ask if there were, what are the concerns you've been hearing from community members, or from people who are more opposed to the project, so that we could, I know you touched on it a little bit, but just so that we can help maybe with that type of messaging. Is it mostly like the neighbors and
it's almost 100% local adjacent neighbors worried about security and you know, worried, hey, are these folks going to go out and, you know, do drugs in our neighborhood and things like this? And you know, some of these questions are very hard to answer. You know, they're not absolutes, but I think what we're doing is we are providing an infrastructure and a strategy to actually try to help address those actual concerns, ironically, that are already currently existing.
Great, thanks. And yeah, Jeannie, go ahead.
So my question is, how long can an individual stay at Hope? And how do you put them into or get them into permanent supportive housing? It seems like there's not that much of it. What's the plan for increasing the availability of that?
Yeah, this is my favorite question. First of all, we do have a tremendous lack of any kind of affordable housing. I mean, in Santa Maria, I think I read an article today that $700,000 is the average cost of a home in Santa Maria. Santa Barbara, it's $1 million or 1.1. It's something ridiculous. So that when you break that down, what salary do you need to kind of buy a house? It's just not attainable for majority of people. So that's an issue. But one thing I have learned, and I'm in full disclosure, I haven't really been in this space for more than a couple of years. I ran a business before this and I just started getting involved. And so I've learned a lot. I've learned most of the myths I had about homelessness are actually wrong. And one of the things I did learn was that when folks get into situations like interim supportive housing with a great service provider, like Good Samaritan and a case manager, a lot of different things can happen. Oftentimes they'll reconnect with family that they've been estranged. You know, families just said, no, you can't be part of our lives anymore. But once they get into a situation like this, they can reconnect, potentially move in with family. Oftentimes they'll come to the decision that maybe living in Santa Barbara is really not the place, you know, the high cost of living. Maybe this just isn't the place to be. You know, they got a job and they're working hard and they just can't make ends meet. Maybe moving out of town is the right move for them. And then there is the permanent supportive housing. And so what we kind of see is like a third. So it doesn't mean that everybody has to get a Section 8 voucher and permanent supportive housing and all that stuff. I mean, we even had one of the 6 people on that list is somebody that was an electrician and earned a pension, didn't realize he had it, started talking with the case manager connected him with the pension. It was so much money. He's in market housing right now. So it's just like things like this can happen.
Wow.
It can't happen. It can't happen if that guy's on the street. That's just no way. Well, it's very unlikely that that situation would have occurred. So it's not cut and dry that everyone, but we do need a lot of permanent supportive housing. Don't get me wrong. Like we need to do more of that. And maybe when we're done building all of these, you'll start to hear me talk about where I'm building permanent supportive housing. But for now, I want to focus on like, this is the need. And we just we have to have a safe place for folks to rest and recover, sleep, get document ready, and so they can take a shower, do laundry, maybe work on employment. And that's what this is meant to do.
And how long can they stay there?
I didn't even answer the question, did I?
Good one, Sandra.
I know. No, I'm not a politician, I swear. So the average stay we think is about 6 months. It just takes a while to get to that place where you're ready to take the next step. 12 months is kind of the outside window of when it's kind of like, hey, look, what's the plan? Is this happening or not? And I'm not running that part of the services. So I try, Sylvia or Kirsten or Hector from Good Samaritan would probably be able to answer that question better than I, how rigid that 12-month date is. I think if people are really making great progress, my guess is that it's not 12 months in a day and you're walked out of there. There's a little bit of flexibility on that, but that's the objective. And I mean, I'm sorry we're going on longer, but my goal here would be that we have enough housing like this, so there's actually a vacant, there's vacant rooms, and then somebody that falls on hard times or has a medical emergency or lost their job or whatever, and they fall into homelessness, that we catch them on that day. Can you imagine how much better off their life would be if they didn't have to spend months, if not years, in the street, maybe self-medicating because it's such a stressful situation? I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I don't know if anybody else is, but like, that's a high bar. But I think if we can keep this momentum and keep this, keep this going, I think we can kind of get close to that. And that makes me, that kind of gets me going every day.
Great. Well,
Thank you.
thanks.
Good.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, I can't wait to see it. It sounds really good. I'd like to see this happen.
Oh.
I know it's going to.
I think something this group is going to love, that we have things like Adopt a Room, where you go buy the bedding and then put nights and notes and toiletries into the room before we put the first folks in there. So if anybody's
that's great.
interested in that, I mean, that's kind of it's a little fundraising thing. It's not like a big, but it's, every little dollar counts for us. And my daughter did one in the downtown one, and I was just showing somebody that today. And I said, if she would kill me if one of those 94 rooms she doesn't get to do again. It's like her favorite. Well, there's only 93 rooms available.
So we'd love to put that out to our members. If you can send us some information on how to do that. We'll put that out.
And then we are also fundraising. So if you know anyone that wants to give, any foundations, donor advised funds, individuals, whatever, send them my way. Nadia, you send my contact information out, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can also send that out to an email. So give us both options to send. We'll send.
There's a web page, Nadia, I'll send that to you, that's specific to the Santa Maria site. It has the video and has kind of buttons where people can donate if they want to.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
You're my brother.
Yeah, we appreciate you so much. This was really great to hear more about the project. And yeah, I know we went a little bit long, but it's all good stuff. And we have the recording. If you know of anyone who wants it, let me know. I'll send it to them. We'll have it on our YouTube channel as well. And yeah, that's it. Any last words from anyone? All right, great. Enjoy your Thursday evening. Thanks so much, Matt, again.
All right.
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Matt.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Good meeting.